What it do? Welcome to another new episode of Locked On Bucks. Some St. Patrick's Day basketball in Milwaukee, Wisconsin ends with the Milwaukee Bucks getting a 140-129 victory over the Phoenix Suns. Khris Middleton made his return to the lineup, but unfortunately Giannis was a scratch at the very last minute. Luckily, between Bobby Portis, Damian Lillard, and Khris Middleton, the Bucks found a way to win. We're going to be breaking down key performances and moments throughout this dub on today's episode of Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis. You can catch me weekly on the Technical File podcast, the Pack-A-Day podcast, as well as Cheesehead TV's Carry the G and MKE during the NFL season. Joining me is Frank Madden, longtime voice of the pod and the founder of BrewHoop.com. We appreciate you for tuning in and thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. We have crossed the 9,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. Shout out to all of y'all. If you have not yet subscribed to the YouTube, make sure y'all do that as well. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Now, Frank, ahead of today's game, we heard that Khris Middleton was making his return, and it seemed like we might see a healthy Bucks rotation, but as mentioned, Giannis happened to be a late scratch. A little bit deflating, but the Bucks rained down a historic amount of threes in the first half. Bobby Portis was scorching hot in the first to create a lead the Bucks wouldn't relinquish, even with the Suns making a push in the second half.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about it before we started recording. The Kings game, the Warriors game. I mean, it felt like both those games, the opponents were just making everything, and it's a make or miss league, right? It so often comes down to one team shooting well from three, and we always say when Giannis is out, obviously that becomes even more acute thing for this Bucks team because they don't have Giannis's interior scoring. So you knew that probably this game was going to come down to how well the Bucks would be able to shoot without Giannis, and I mean that first half was an absolute, flame throwing show from the Bucks. I think we were trying to figure out if it was 18-26 or 18 of 27. But it was just an incredible shooting performance regardless. Again, 18 threes and a half. You can kind of look at it and say like, well, they were shooting unsustainably hot, so it made sense that Phoenix got back into it. They didn't go the Celtics route and just give up in the third quarter. But I kind of on some level, like I think in the grand scheme of the universe, it'd been cool to win by 40 points or something. But I think it's probably good in the grand scheme of getting tested that the Suns did come back. The Suns did show some fight. You saw what some of that talent translates to in terms of being able to kind of reel the Bucks in pretty quickly when the Bucks started to miss some shots. So, obviously Bobby was the story of the first half with those 25 points. But, Dame, it was awesome to see Dame to end that third quarter score. I think he had 14 points, and then he scores 14 in the last 4 minutes or so of that third quarter, was drawing fouls, and then caps it off with wasn't a Dame time winner, obviously, but kind of reminiscent of the shot he hit against Sacramento in terms of beating the third quarter buzzer to cap off, a really nice response from the Bucks to get it back to 15. And, the Suns, again, they kept sticking with it, got it down into single digits on a couple of occasions in the fourth quarter, but kind of every time that happened, the Bucks had an answer. And a really good win. I think any win where you beat a talented team like this when you don't have Giannis is going to be a really good win. And, we've seen, again, some of the more fun wins now of the season. They're 3-1 without Giannis. The Clipper win, that early season Toronto revenge game win in Canada have been three pretty fun wins. The Toronto game felt a lot like this one in terms of Dame just scoring and playmaking and other guys just hitting a ton of shots. And so Again, we haven't seen kind of this version of the Bucks in a while, this sort of score 140, give up, 129 type of game. But given the circumstances, again, like you take it, bank it, and happily move on to a couple off days before you get a very marquee matchup in Boston on Wednesday.
Absolutely. You mentioned two of the guys I want to make sure we spend some time talking about with Bobby and Damian, of course, Khris and his return as well. But the 3-point shooting, I did find the numbers. They were 18 of 27 in the first half. So they shot 67% from three in the first half. Meanwhile, Phoenix was 3 of 13. They shot 23%. Like the Bucks made more threes than Phoenix attempted in the first half of the game. That tied an NBA record for most threes made in a half, and it also broke the Bucks franchise record for threes in the half. So just insane shooting by the Bucks. And when Bobby went on that scorcher, it was like when he checked in at the end of the first, you're like, okay, Bobby makes his first 5. You're like, okay, 12 points. That was quick. Then the second quarter starts and Bobby is just like on fire. Finished the first half 10 of 13, 25 points in 13 minutes in the first half. It was a really good Bobby game. And even in the second half, the shooting cooled down in the third, but we saw the Suns go small in the third midway through, taking Nurkic out. Doc responded, getting Brooke out the game. You saw a lot of Bobby at the 5 in this game, and the Bucks had to do what they had to do in order to match what they were seeing by Phoenix. And listen, in 12 games since All-Star break with Bobby, he's averaging literally 17 points and 8 rebounds a game. He's shooting 80% from the free throw line, 54% from the field, 43% from three. I know Malik Monk is a favorite right now for 6th man of the year, but it feels to me like Bobby is making a late push and stating the case like, hey, I should get some consideration for 6th man of the year as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was actually just messaging with our friend Eric Name yesterday about Bobby and kind of how, the kind of perception of him has waxed and waned, and probably more frustration with Bobby over the past few months than I don't know if maybe at any other time during his tenure in Milwaukee. But I mean, it's kind of funny. It's like you look at his stats. I mean, his true shooting percentage is like been the exact same for like 3 straight years, even before today's game. Obviously, today's game is going to help. His per 36 scoring, his minutes this year are down from higher 20 minutes down to around 24-minute mark. But like in terms of permanent scoring, this year has been basically the same as the last couple of years. Right close up near 20 points per 36, which is kind of like the high end of his scoring. So it's not like his numbers are really like that wildly different. Like his 3-point percentage, obviously early in his Bucks tenure, he had that high 40s percentage mark when he shot fewer threes. He's kind of high 30s this year. Again, that number heading up when you make 5 of 5 in today's game. But kind of Bobby's been sort of Bobby, I think, to a large extent. I don't think obviously defensively it's ever been easy for him. I think the year when Brooke was out, he benefited from playing with Giannis and the starters a ton, and the numbers are relatively better. But again, I think Bobby's been kind of like largely the kind of guy that we've expected to see. He's durable, and the numbers you just cited, I think, reflect the fact that he's still a really valuable, at least regular season player, just because he's always available. And on nights like this, when you don't have Giannis, he will often pop up and be able to score at a high level. Granted, you don't typically expect 31 points from him on a night like this. But he was really good. And, again, with Bobby, when the offense isn't there, that's when you worry. And certainly there have been a lot of road games in particular this year where it feels like, he isn't able to play at the level that you need him at. And so I think this Boston game is going to be really interesting because Bobby struggled a couple years ago against the Celtics in the playoffs, did have that one big tip in, I guess it was game 5. That was like the deciding basket. But for the most part, Boston's been a really difficult matchup for him. He was really poor in the first matchup in Boston between these two teams. So he's definitely got something to prove in a situation like this. But yeah, I mean, again, his play has been trending up. And I think probably most importantly, the consistency has been going in the right direction, including on the road where, he has been a home court player. And psychologically, you kind of understand it. He talked about after the game how much the fans and the energy he draws from them. I mean, to me, it's like a very symbiotic thing. Like he's the guy I'd always look at as the guy that gives energy to the crowd, especially like third quarter. people coming back slowly from
Yep.
concession stands, kind of the energy can kind of lag. Bobby, oftentimes when he checks into the game midway through the third quarter, feels like he's oftentimes that kind of adrenaline spark that the Bucks need. And today, obviously, from kind of the second he set foot on the floor, he had that like random, like off an inbound, he like got wide open from like 14 feet and just sort of like hit like a wide open jumper from the elbow. And it was just kind of off to the races from there. So again, more of this, Bobby. Don't need 31
Okay.
points every night, but especially from an offensive standpoint, the bench unit we've talked about all year, they've obviously had stretches from the bench where they just need more scoring punch, and so they again desperately need somebody to deliver, and obviously Bobby on a day like this. I'm not sure if that's a sneak peek of what we're going to see in the playoffs or something, but yeah, I mean, hopefully he's just finding a good rhythm, and again, his play was infectious. That shooting was seemingly infectious today.
It was really fun to see. I love seeing him be able to go on that type of heater at home in front of the fans, just to egging them on, the loud Bobby chants. Like, it was everything. I was at home myself just doing Bobby chants from my couch, hoping to contribute to the energy that was in the building. But as those of you who have listened to this show know, and Frank, I'm a huge Khris Middleton fan, probably my favorite Buck of this current modern era. And he made his return, was injured against the Phoenix Suns, makes his return against the Phoenix Suns. Let's dig into how Khris looked in his return right after this. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. Plus, LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. So LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that actually helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, and it's no wonder why that is. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Bucks. A special shout out to the everydayers who tune in Monday through Friday. And as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel called Locked On Sports Today. And for the baseball fans, I'm going to need you to mark your calendars. March 20th, 6 p.m. Central Time. The best MLB season preview is coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. Be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, find it March 20th, 6 p.m. Central Time on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel. You can see that on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, whichever one tickles your fancy. Check it out there. As we mentioned, Khris Middleton is back. He made his return, and I felt like he was a real steadying force throughout the game. Finished 22 points, 7 assists, 3 rebounds. Before he returned from injury, some of his comments about what he feels that he brings to the team, I found them to be very interesting, and they ring true with a lot of what we have talked about here on Locked On Bucks about the value of Khris Middleton. Now, part of what took Khris so long is he said that he was worried about being a cone on defense with the ankle injury. He wanted to make sure that he was not going to be a liability. In addition to that, he said without him being in the lineup, he knows that it was forcing guys into different roles. So I'm going to read this direct quote because I thought it was really interesting. He said, quote, with Giannis and Dame being the primary ball handlers and playmakers, everybody else has been trying to do a little bit more. They've been stepping out of their role, and I think they've been doing a great job. I don't want to use frustration as a word. How do I say it? I feel like the guys felt like they weren't playing up to their potential, and that's just because there is a missing piece out there. I like to consider myself as a bridge. which is connecting the pieces, being a playmaker at times, being a scorer at times. And when you lose a guy that can play make and help put other guys in their spots that they're comfortable in, they thrive. That's what I'm hoping to add as I come back, end quote. And I think Khris provided that in bunches on his way back. I saw it in the third quarter when Khris checked out for his time. The Bucks were up 72-93. Suns went on a quick 15-2 run with him on the bench to push the score, get that lead down to about 8 points at that time, I believe it was. Luckily, Dame stepped in to help steady the group going into the fourth quarter, but Khris Middleton's played throughout the game. I saw him really being that steadying force. He was playmaking when he needed to, 7 assists. He was getting his buckets when he needed to. And it was just really nice to have Khris back, even though Giannis wasn't there, but it's the first step back for Khris Middleton on the court.
Yeah, I mean, didn't really look like he, missed a beat. I mean, I think you have to say I think his movement again, like if you compared his movement now versus 2017, I think you'd say, yeah, I mean, he was, quicker, more athletic back then. I think probably the most interesting frame of reference is trying to compare him 2021 versus now, right? When they won a championship. I think back then, he put in a fair amount of work against KD in that Nets series. People always think of it as like, oh, PJ Tucker was guarding KD the entire time. But I think Eric Name always reminds me of this, but I think, Khris was actually guarding him, I think, for a lot of like the overtime when KD went 0 for 6. And, we saw it tonight. He had a few shifts against KD, even though Jay Crowder started on him and did a really nice job. Jay Crowder, got to probably give him a moment here at some point tonight to talk about what he did both defensively and offensively. But yeah, I mean, we saw it start of the second quarter. Bucks were up 3 entering that period. KD and Beal are on the floor for Phoenix. For the Bucks, Pat Bev's playing point guard. You had Bobby, I think it was Bobby, Pat, AJ Green was out there, I think, as well. And Khris is effectively the point guard. I mean, they're not having Pat like bring up the ball and try to get them into offense. Pat missed a couple. I think he missed about 3 floaters in that span. But again, I think it's just such a luxury to be able to put the ball in Khris's hands and know that he's going to make good decisions. And if you need a bailout shot, he can kind of create a little bit of room and get to that mid ranger. And we saw it repeatedly again tonight, just him getting to spots, twisting, turning, fadeaway jumpers against different defenders. And for him to, be out 6 weeks and then immediately go 8 for 15, 22 points, 7 assists. Yeah. I mean, it's just remarkable. So yeah, I mean, you just cross your fingers that obviously the ankle and everything else can stay healthy. But I thought he generally looked good. Yeah, I mean, it's just a great luxury to have. And I think especially, when you're going to have Giannis back, knock on wood, presumably on Wednesday, just being able to stagger that group of 3 just really changes, I think, the complexion of the offense, just because, again, as much as, Jay Crowder can knock down an open 3, didn't really do that for a couple months straight, has I think 7 for 12 the last 2 games. He's obviously not going to create pass playmake the way Khris does. And really nobody else on the roster, right, other than Dame and Giannis, can do anything close to what Khris does. So I don't know. It just felt like this past month or so, whenever Dame and Giannis weren't out there together, you just kind of got a little nervous that the offense wasn't going to be able to sustain and create quality shots. And Khris obviously is just such a huge piece in terms of smoothing that kind of those minutes over. And as I mentioned here in the second quarter, you saw it. We obviously saw it previously, like start of fourth quarters. We've seen Khris be a guy that can carry a second unit and at least make sure that, you sort of hold the lead while your main guys are getting some rest. So again, I'm excited to see Giannis and Khris back out there. Khris throwing oops to Giannis like they have for the past decade. But on a day like this where, you're missing Giannis, obviously, they don't win this game if Khris Middleton doesn't come back, right? And so again, I think it's one thing that's interesting. I was listening to Zach Lowe and he had a pod on Friday, and he was kind of talking about it's just like kind of the frustration, like the Bucks just like they just don't, they just can't seem to put together like that string of like high quality, play, right? Like they had the win streak after the All-Star break, but like just doesn't feel, it's feel like something's kind of off. And it's, because I was listening to him, I'm just like, well, they're not a championship team without Khris Middleton, I mean, they're good enough, they should be able to win games, right? I think it's fair to still hold them to a reasonably high bar, even when they're missing Khris during the regular season. But in the grand scheme of the universe, I mean, this team without Khris as that third kind of connective piece, they can only be so good. And so I think the unfortunate part is, yeah, they're going to have games where they just can't score. And I think that's where, even as much as Khris is a shooter, he's a guy that I think can help you kind of get through some of those bad shooting nights. And obviously tonight was not one of those nights. But I think he just sort of smooths things over. So yeah, I mean, they're not winning a championship unless, Giannis, Dame, Khris, and Brooke. I think we didn't need to see a lot of Brooke today because of how small Phoenix went. But if you don't have those four, hey, love what we saw from Bobby today. We can talk about role player impact and things like that. But this team will only go as far as kind of those 3-4 guys can take them. And obviously, a day like today gives you some optimism of what they can mean. But I was looking at the on-off numbers. 3 Giannis, Dame, and Khris together plus 17 net rating. 127 offensive rating. I mean, just juggernaut stuff. You take away Khris from that group, Dame and Giannis like +7, Khris and Giannis without Dame like +3. So at least you're still like positive, right? When you have got 2 of the 3. But Giannis by himself -6, right? And I think that just speaks to the fact that Dame's offense and his ball handling and his creation, especially with the fact that they have no other like true point guard on the roster at this point. Dame's obviously essential. You're not anywhere without Dame, and I think Khris is obviously the other guy there that when you got him, that really just unlocks another level for this team. So anyway, Khris, stay healthy. That's the moral of the story.
Please, please, please. And with that, it reminds me, Doc after the game mentioned like on this Bucks team, the 3 big playmakers who are going to create for others is going to be Giannis, Dame, and Khris. Like those are the 3. And they knew coming into this game without Giannis that Bobby was going to have to step up into that creation role a bit. And as we saw, he was hot. But again, having Khris Middleton back is such a big thing for this team. And Doc mentioned how hard it can be at times to try to find the right balance for the third guy when you have a big trio like that. And he mentioned, in Boston, it was Ray Allen who saw some of his shots take a step back. He had to sacrifice a bit. You saw it with Chris Bosh in Miami. So he's like, it's going to be key for us to figure out the right balance of how to also bring in Khris Middleton in this because he's such an important part. Very high IQ player. Mentioned that Khris was even out there calling plays before the coaching staff could do so because Khris was like, I studied the film. I know what they want us to get into. So having that mind on the court, helping to get them the bench units together, very, very valuable. And another thing that's valuable is Dame time. We've mentioned him in passing a bit throughout the show, but listen, the way that Dame was able to facilitate for others, especially in the first half, 12 first half assists by Dame, and then in the second half kind of flip and turn on, put that scoring cap on. It was a great game from Dame. So let's talk a little bit more about what we saw from him after this. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, your size, and your budget. And again, for me, that budget piece is the key part. They do it all. And when I say they do it all, I mean they do all the shopping for you. It is the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. Stitch Fix makes it so easy. Personally, I do not like going to shop. I don't like shopping. I don't feel like I'm good at it. Wasting my time, it feels like at times. I don't know what I'm doing. But Stitch Fix saves me the time and the effort. Plus, I get outfits to make me look good and feel good as well. All I got to do is I give my stylist my size, my style, my budget. I order boxes when I want and how I want. There is no subscription required. So on those months when the money is low, I can just pause that and just wait till the money flows back in. They send 5 just for me pieces plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. I keep what works and I send back the rest. So, like I just said, I can send back the rest. So, if you don't love something, send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today with Stitch Fix at stitchfix.com/locked on. That's stitchfix.com/locked on. Repeat it for the third time for you, just so you don't forget it. Stitchfix.com/locked on. Make sure y'all go and check that out. Damian Lillard, really great game from Dame tonight. At this point now, with this win, the Bucks are now 27-4 when Dame scores at least 25 points. They're 16-1 when Dame scores at least 30 points. At halftime in this game, he already had a double-double. He had 14 points, 12 assists at halftime. He was shooting 50% from the field at that time. 12 first half assists is the most assists that Damian Lillard has ever had in one half of basketball in the NBA. And then to end the third quarter, like I mentioned, when Khris sat out, the Bucks offense kind of started to come unhinged, started to get stuck in the mud a bit. But to end the third quarter, Dame went on his own personal 9-0 run, I believe it was, to end the quarter, including that really deep three to put the Bucks up 15 heading into the fourth. He had 14 points in the last 4 minutes of the quarter. Finished the game with 16 assists, tied his career high. Had 31 points on efficient shooting from the field, 10-19 from the field, 4-8 from three. Really good Dame game. And in post game, when Dame was talking about it, he's like, shout out to my teammates. They were knocking down shots. I feel like a lot of times I do deliver these passes, but the other guys got to make the shots. And today they were knocking them down. So it helps with the assist, but Dame having the feel of the game to understand exactly when to pass it, when to score, when to be aggressive. Like, it was beautiful to see in this game.
And I thought he was getting to the paint with relative ease. I think we've seen like Sacramento was, really kind of pressuring him, it's basically as soon as he got inside half court. We've seen, the Clippers running extra bodies at him when they're trying to run pick and roll. I thought this game, it felt like he had a little more room to operate, and it felt like he was getting downhill pretty regularly. Grayson Allen, who I think was a very solid defender for the Bucks last year, just felt like Dame
couldn't keep up.
Couldn't keep up. Yeah, Dame was getting past him, and the downside for Phoenix of playing these small lineups is you just don't have much rim protection when you've got no Nurkic, no Drew Eubanks, and it just felt like Dame was getting to the edge and getting to the basket, and if they did send extra help, then he was just spraying the ball out for wide open shooters, and so I'd be curious to check tomorrow the wide open shooting stats for this game, because it felt like the Bucks just had an absolute like avalanche of wide open shots. Again, they made shots. There was some, some unsustainable shooting in there for sure. But again, I think they did an awesome job of just kind of manipulating the Phoenix defense and getting the kind of shots that they want to take and that they're comfortable taking. So obviously with Dame being the quarterback of the offense, it so often started with him. And again, I thought as much as he had the big numbers in the first half, the first half was Bobby's half, in the grand scheme of things. But it really was impressive the way Dame was able to really settle the team down after Phoenix went on their run, to really cut in the lead and kind of make you say like, ooh, wait a minute. This feels like this is kind of heading the wrong direction here. All of a sudden you're thinking, man, what if we blow, a 25-point lead and lose this game? Like, man, what is that going to look like? But as you said, Dame kind of went on that personal run, and I think the thing that obviously we've talked a bit about, his kind of going through some issues, drawing fouls, 7 of 7 today. So it wasn't like a huge free throw night for him, but it felt like I think he had, I don't know if it was 4 free throws or how many it was, but I think he had a 3-point play and then had a couple more trips to the foul line in that late third quarter period before he capped it off with that buzzer beater. So again, just great players being able to kind of have a sense of, okay, now I need to go and manufacture some offense. I need to kind of stabilize things. Like, that's obviously what you look for from a guy of Dame's caliber. But again, I think with Dame, it's the challenge is, and we should say this on a night when he was great. We know Dame can be great. I mean, we've seen Dame have awesome games throughout this season. Maybe we saw more consistency in the month of December. That felt like that was his kind of best month overall. But then you had some backsliding. Obviously, we've talked about the January and kind of pre-All-Star February issues and kind of just the shooting problems in particular. So what does this game mean in the grand scheme of Damian Lillard's first year as a Milwaukee Bucks player? I don't know. It's great. I'm happy that he had it. They needed him to have it, especially with Giannis out. And does he seem to look more comfortable when Giannis has been out? Has he had some huge games? Yeah, he has. But again, like Dame, if you want to win a championship, we know you can score 30 points a game playing on a bad team that isn't going anywhere, right? Like, been there, done that, right? Like, the point is, can you consistently be good and impactful playing on a team that can win a championship and is going to need you to be impactful night in and night out in the playoffs, especially against, the top competition in the East and, knock on wood, the best team that comes out of the West. So, I mean, it's like, great job, Dame, great job, Bucks. But you can't be doing this, once out of every 3 games, and the other 2 games this week, you kind of go back into a bit of a shell, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously, this game in Boston is going to be a great follow up to this, because it's like we saw it. He was awesome against the Clippers, and then he didn't. He got basically outplayed by Keon Ellis in Sacramento, and then it's always kind of this back and forth, this kind of yo-yoing with Dame, that it's felt like he just hasn't gotten to the point where 6 out of 7 games he's looked awesome, right? There's going to be nights where you're not at your best, but the Bucks just need a higher level of consistency from him than what we've seen so far. And again, if this is just regular season whatever stuff, like, okay, but obviously, this is the first time we're seeing Dame in a Bucks uniform, mm-hmm. and they've been very candid, right? They've sort of been trying to figure some things out. He's been trying to figure out how to kind of stay in that rhythm and know how to balance being aggressive with playing within the structure of the offense and with obviously other good players. So, super excited with Dame's performance on Sunday. But what does this mean for the Bucks playoff odds? If he just turns around and has a poor game in Boston, well, then probably not a whole lot, right? So they're going to need him to show that he can do this against the best teams, the best defenses in the league, in addition to, in a game like this where obviously the defense was at a bit of a premium.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point to bring up. We've talked about wanting to see stacked continued success, stacked progress from Dame. And you mentioned the rough January that he had. February was a better month for him, and it feels like March is also trending that way. In the month of March, he's shooting 93%. I'm not 93. I wish he was shooting 93%. He's shooting 39% from 3, shooting 42% from the field. So, the numbers are ticking up. When we saw the January numbers come through, and it was like, man, it's been a rough month. He shot 28% from 3 in that month, 39% from the field. So we're seeing numbers tick up for Dame slowly but surely. But again, in the playoffs, can you get 4 out of 7? Can you get 4 out of 7 on a consistent basis? So that's what we have to see from this team. And before we wrap up, I do just want to point out the fact we talked about it a little bit, but 6 different Bucks players ended the game in double-digit scoring. We've talked about Bobby, mentioned Dame, mentioned Khris, the 3 leading scorers. So, of course, those are the 3 who are going to get the most attention. But also shout out to Brooke, Bees, Jay. Especially I want to shout out Jay Crowder. Another good shooting game from 3 for Jay. You mentioned his shooting splits over the last 2. Tonight, he was 4 of 6 from long range, had 18 points. So including today over his last 4 games, he is now 8 of 14 from 3, 57%. He's shooting 38% from 3 in the month of March so far, and he hadn't shot extremely well from 3 coming back from injury. He shot 24% from 3 in February. So again, I don't expect Jay Crowder to be a 50% 3-point shooter, but seeing him get some of those shots to fall was really, really good. It bodes well for the Bucks. Same with Malik Beasley. Seeing him in rhythm, seeing him knock down shots bodes well for the Bucks. So I wanted to make sure to shout them out before we wrapped up. Did you have any thoughts on Jay, Bees, or Brooke you wanted to say before we get out of here, Frank?
I mean, awesome for Jay. Obviously, revenge game. We saw him hit a couple of shots last year in Phoenix after he joined the Bucks, after that acrimonious departure from Arizona. So, the fact that he was able to do that again today obviously was really important. I thought, Kevin Durant, 4-10,
crazy to think.
Really held in check today. KD, again, you can say he just wasn't aggressive enough for sure. I'd say that's a valid argument. Devin Booker, 23 points on 22 shots. Take that every day. Beal was really the only guy that got going, and a lot of that felt like it was, when they went small, Bobby being the only big out there, they were able to get isolated on him and attack him a fair bit, which, again, if this was full strength Bucks, curious, would we have seen Giannis as, the center without another true big man out there? Giannis 1v1 against a guard, you feel obviously a lot better about that matchup than you do about Bobby. Not that I'm complaining about Bobby today, but yeah, I thought that was just, big minutes from Jay Crowder. He had 3 steals, felt like he was really active in terms of deflections, getting some strips, getting his hands on the ball, and just being really strong defensively in a game where obviously there wasn't a ton of defense that was getting played. The only other thing I'll point out, Camille, there's just guys in the league that you just find annoying, and it could be because of stuff they do in general, or it could be because of something that happened with the Bucks. So Nurkic, I think it was in 2017. You remember when Giannis had it was 40, he had the 44, and it was early in the season. He had 44 points. He missed a couple free throws, but then he got a steal, got a dunk, and then he blocked Nurkic to end the game when the Blazers, I believe, had a chance to tie or win it. Well, early in that game, I remember Nurkic, he either blocked Giannis or he dunked on him in transition or something, and he gave him a Matumba wag or something like that. And I was immediately like, all right, screw this guy. Yusuf Nurkic is now my mortal enemy for the rest of the time. So when Giannis blocked him, it was suck it, Nurk. It made it that much sweeter. And Nurkic is I think he had some Twitter thing that he tweeted something about Giannis, and he was making a big deal during Giannis's free throw stuff, and just basically giving him the disrespect when he was shooting jump shots and trying to play mind games and stuff like that. So I'm officially Nurkic is on my top 5 dudes that I most want to see just get destroyed by Giannis / the Bucks / anyone. So he obviously did not play a big role today. I enjoyed Bobby torching him in the second quarter. Nurk trying to run around defending Bobby was not happening. So screw you, Nurk. I also thought when he had the whole thing with Draymond, it was annoying because he had the moral high ground on Draymond, and I'm normally kind of I don't know, I'm kind of take it or leave it on Draymond. He's aggravating, but he's awesome. But then I found myself after everything, I was just all right, screw you, Nurk. You need to be put in your place. He was complaining about Draymond after he came back and all this stuff, and I'm just all right. So I am demonstrably anti-Yusuf Nurkic now. So anytime you can beat Nurk and he doesn't really do much in a game, that's a good day for me. I would have loved to see Giannis get a chance to baptize him with a dunk today. He got him really good. I think it was last year. He got him really good on a driving dunk when Nurk was in Portland. But yeah, Nurkic, F out of here. Go home. He's had a good year for the Suns, but if the Suns are continue to disappoint and fall short in the playoffs, again, I don't really have anything against the Suns, but Yusuf Nurkic, I'm gonna root against them just because of Nurkic.
Well,
hashtag petty. All right, Camille.
Petty Frank. I love hashtag Petty Frank. I'm here
Spicy
for
Frank. It. Spicy Frank, our friend of the pod, Bryn Riley, sometimes tweets at me, calls me Spicy Frank when I start to get really petty about stuff. So shout out to you, Bryn. Yes, Spicy Frank. When it comes to Nurk, I'm over Nurk.
Well, at least Nurk walked out of Milwaukee with an L, so that should bring some joy to you with the Phoenix Suns catching the L tonight. But that'll do it for me and Frank today on Locked On Bucks. As a reminder, y'all, make sure you check out Locked On Sports today, March 20th at 6 p.m. Central Time. MLB preview. You're not going to want to miss that. You're also not going to want to miss Locked On Bucks throughout the rest of the week. So make sure y'all come back. Appreciate y'all. Take care.